Charles, I'd love to hear how you can build with that.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. So I very much appreciated Flavia's remarks, especially the part about law being a way that life energy is, or life itself is channeled, or maybe the law, this is what law should be, or is ideally channels through a culture. We recognize that there's something sacred about the law. It originated as a sacred function, and some of that perception is still with us today in the regalia of judges and courtrooms and the ritual around it. We recognize this as an embodiment of something sacred, which is the cultural agreement about what is right, what is just, what a good human being does, what is not allowed. It's a way that we collectively guide our behavior. To do that effectively, to not get lost, we have to have some collective sense of who we are as a species, where we are going, what a human being is for, what is important in life, how the world works. All of these things are embodied in the set of agreements that we call law. They're also embodied in other systems, in money especially. That's also a system of agreements, economics, education, science, technology, all of these things in their direction and their methods embody our deeper stories. And I know that in the course of the last couple of days, we've talked about a transition in our stories from a narration of the world that is deterministic and reductionistic and competitive and so forth into one of interbeing. And as I use that word, I want to honor Thich Nhat Hanh, who I don't know if he actually invented the word, but he certainly was one of the people who started using that early on. But it's a very natural term to express what we're talking about here, an understanding of our mysterious, intimate connections with each other that go beyond simply forces operating on masses, that understand that existence itself is a relationship. Even in quantum mechanics, something cannot be said to exist at a certain point in space-time until a measurement has been taken. In other words, until a relationship has been entered into with the observer. So I'm not going to dwell too long on the metaphysical and physical foundations of this, but just to say that the task before us, as we talk about designing or constitutionalizing new systems, I want to say, like, even before we go there, what does the concept of design as normally understood, what does that smuggle in as far as assumptions go? One thing, so the third principle that you mentioned, I can't remember how you said it, but some kind of emergence of order, basically understanding that order, design, intelligence in this world, beauty, meaning, these are not solely human creations that we impose onto a world that has none of these properties. That is a conceit of modernity that puts human beings in the center of the universe as the sole source of intelligence. We'd like to think that that replaced the idea of God as the sole animating power and source of intelligence. But that's actually a fairly degenerate understanding of God that in itself is a feature of the modern mind. Originally, divinity or sacredness was inherent in all matter, in all things. So when we speak of design, I want to just flag this pitfall. That and not to say that we never should try to design anything and never exercise our creativity and never make plans. And no, I'm not saying that. But what we need to understand that complexity, life, organization, that these are inherent properties of the universe, and that we can reconceive what a human being is for in light of that understanding, so that we are no longer the lords and masters imposing design onto a world that has none, but we become servants of that which wants to be born. To even countenance such a thing as that which wants to be born is already a huge departure from science, because it's an anthropomorphic projection. There's no wanting outside of the human being, right? Well, it's time to let go of that, because our attempt to impose, to ascend above nature and to create utopia, to create even a better world by imposing our designs onto it, I think we can agree that it is not working very well. The condition of humanity is not improving, certainly not over the course of my lifetime. And we could argue about whether it's improved since primitive agrarian or hunter-gatherer days. That's a whole other conversation. But, you know, just looking at the state of humanity in my country, things are not getting any better. And we're supposed to, my country, we're supposed to be the pinnacle of development. So that's why many people now are looking toward other world stories. For example, indigenous world stories, or the world stories from wisdom traditions within our own cultures, to find another way to understand who we are and what's real and how to live in this world. So these are, so this bears on what we even mean by design. You know, I've done work in various fields. Basically, my work is about, okay, what does the story of interbeing look like as translated into money, into economics, into science, into medicine, into education, and so on, into law a little bit. I haven't actually done that much thinking about that some. And so I used to have this idea that all I had to do was come up with the design, and then somehow, like, I didn't really think exactly how it was going to work, but somehow it would be so brilliant that everybody would be like, oh yeah, this is what we got to do. It would be like this matter of persuasion. It doesn't work, because even if in the very rare occasion that I gain the ear of somebody in power, what I've discovered is that they'll be like, yeah, Charles, sounds great, but I can't implement any of that. If I even venture into that territory, you know, what's the opposition party going to say? What are my financial backers going to say? What about the electorate? What about the lobbyists? What about this? What about, it's just impossible. So that really made me reconsider my whole strategy. How do we serve as agents of a change that is beyond our capacity to control, predict, or force into existence? And it becomes a matter of listening, a matter of waiting, and then a matter of acting through a recognition of a call to action that might be unexplainable by the rational mind. And what is the nature of that call? That call is you care about something. The call comes through the heart. And so, okay, I'm not saying that let's abandon this idea of designing systems, writing constitutions, embodying, I mean, this is what a lot of my work has been, translating this into systems and agreements. But it's just something to be aware of. It's a different orientation that can then come in to, say, the design of law. One of the things that Flavia said was local systems of law are now being subordinated to global imperatives, things like trade treaties or global maybe medical policies. I'm not sure exactly what she was referring to, that are disconnected to the needs of a local community. So it becomes a matter of how do you reconnect the system of sacred agreement called law with the actual needs of a place and of the evolving consciousness of humanity. So, because right now, law, actually, it's illegal to do a lot of the things that are most necessary for the planet, and uneconomic to do a lot of the things that are most necessary for the planet. So the big question here in our design efforts is how do we realign these systems of agreement with the new stories and the new consciousness that are coming to the fore today. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Charles. That's very powerful. And these are very, very fundamental questions that we need to explore and build on. And a very important point you raised about indeed design as well. Just like you need a different understanding of law, you need a different understanding of design.
Listening to this brings up a lot of questions and a lot of potential for us to understand how we can really be involved in embodying and enacting these new, not necessarily even new, because these are actually age-old ways of communing, common unity, community. But rather than wax forth on this, I'm going to ask another question here of our lovely panel. And maybe we can go in reverse order here. I mix it up a little bit. We'll start with Charles and then move to Naresh and end with Flavia. And the question now is, if we were to think about the aspect in which all these new constitutions are coming online, people are working on these kind of things. We've seen the seeds thing that Anne-Luce has shared. If we go from the principles that we've been discussing just now, Naresh, you were just focusing on as well, and we start to think in terms of the important actions that we need to take, personally, interpersonally, organizationally, what are the important actions that you would call to our attention? Because tomorrow again, we're going to be moving into action collectively around this. So just to prepare for that, how would you think about that? Charles.
So just before I answer that question, I'm going to not answer the question by saying that to make a generic statement about what is important outside of a frame of relationality actually subtly draws on what I call the old story, the story of separation. What is important for whom? For me, something, it might be important for me to write an essay on something. For somebody else, the most important thing to do to contribute to the future that we are all serving could be to learn the guitar and give voice to something that has been seeking expression in them. For somebody else, it might be to work with children in a kindergarten. For somebody, I mean, it doesn't have to. So to say, okay, here is what is important is not. I'm cautious to say that. However, I can say that most generally the question maybe implies important for what. And that goes back to what is a human being for and what is humanity for on Earth? I mean, that's what important comes from. I would then offer a new and ancient truth, which is that the purpose of a human being and humanity generally is to contribute to life and beauty on Earth, to serve life and beauty on Earth. So, okay, then we can translate that into policies, into designs of constitutions by holding that in mind. And often this isn't just like some arid philosophy, because it often animates our policies with new imperatives. Like, when it comes to environmental policy, one thing that gets ignored, even under the guise of sustainability, which then becomes about carbon credits and measuring greenhouse gases and reduces environmentalism, reduces sustainability to one thing, which is totally inconsistent with a systems view that understands that the health and the homeostasis and the coherence and the evolution of Earth depends on all of its cells, organs, and tissues, because it is a living being. That's what happens when we formalize and reduce a complex thing to a simple thing. And then when we say, okay, but what does environmentalism become, or environmental policy become, when we understand ourselves as in service to life? It expands. It includes, like, yeah, we're not going to sacrifice this coastal wetlands to build a new port. Even if when we calculate the carbon math, we could offset it with a field of solar panels or something like that. No, this is life, this is sacred, and we are here to protect and regenerate the biosphere as part of what a human being is for. So that would be, to answer your question, what's important, what that actually means for each person is unique, but that it would be an animating principle that I would offer. Important for what? What do we agree is important? Thank you.
Charles, thank you so much. The way I'm capturing that in a very concise form is contextual action in service of life. Contextualized action, better says contextualized. So it depends. The answer is it depends, as you're saying. That is the question of really thinking, not one size fits all, but thinking, how is this serving? How does this action fit in with this dynamic in this context? And this is the kind of thing, Naresh, that you are looking at with regard to complex adaptive systems. And what's your take on this in terms of important action?
Continuing from Hazel's invocation of unwarranted assumptions of economics, and we could also say energy policy, like one of those assumptions is that you see it everywhere. Our need for energy is projected to rise to whatever by whatever year. Like, do we actually need more and more energy? Well, that is an economic question. It's also a spiritual question that Naresh brought up when he talked about the insatiable need of a separate self to have more and more and more. Fundamentally, when we are cut off through our systems, through our trauma, through our ideology, from our connectedness and belonging and community, I mean, this isn't just a bad idea that we're a separate self. It manifests as systems. It manifests as the breakdown of community. It manifests as most children have, in my society, couldn't name 5 plants or 10. And even if they could name them, they wouldn't be multidimensionally connected to them, using them as food and medicine, knowing what animals eat those plants, knowing their role in the ecosystem, being part of that ecosystem, not just knowing it as an object of study, but as a participation. You take all that away, and yeah, I mean, you can meditate to fulfill your spiritual needs or something like that, or to be connected to source, but okay, but what about the community? What about building a world around our nature, which is that we are interbeings? So this plays into economics, like the idea that human betterment is a matter of GDP growth. I'm sure I don't need to shoot that down here. I'm sure we all understand the shortcomings of that paradigm, but it also comes out in energy growth and like, are we actually happier when we consume more BTUs per capita, drive more miles per capita, have more stuff, have bigger houses per capita? No, empirically, we are not happier. So what if we oriented toward meeting the needs that we recognize when we understand who we actually are as interconnected beings who have been cut off from that? That opens up all kinds of possibilities. That and because I'm not saying let's do with less. It's actually let's do with much more of what we really need and less of what we don't actually need, that's been substituting futilely for what we do need. Like what we need, well, I mentioned some of them. I just add one more, is aesthetic nourishment, beauty, to be surrounded by things that are made with care and made in a relationship to myself. I mean, how satisfying would that be if every article of clothing that you owned was something that was really crafted, not only for beauty, but also for you? Like, would you need closets and closets full of shoes? You know, this is the kind of thing that it's like paradise is so close to us, just a shift of perception away. And instead we're like, well, how do we produce more to meet? And yeah, there are people in serious deprivation all over this earth, like starving to death, stunted children, people in dire poverty. But that isn't because we don't have enough. It's because of maldistribution. And to sweep that aside and think that it is a problem of production and say, well, or the problem of overpopulation or any of these other reductionistic metrics that substitute for complex systems understanding is contributing to the problem. So thank you.
These are precisely the challenges of awareness, of interconnectedness that we're exploring in this symposium. And my friends, we are basically at time. So I'm just going to ask for Charles and Flavia, if you have any final words for this session, and then Anna Luz and I will bridge to tomorrow's session, and then we'll call that a wrap for today. Charles, first with you.
I mean, there's so much I could say. This conversation's been getting more and more interesting as it goes along. I mean, just the part about algorithms cannot be ethical, like this idea that we can export our morality onto a formula, somehow escape like the messy human realm of relationship, and make it all clean and precise, and someday administer the whole world according to the numbers. That is like the ultimate expression of a several hundred-year-old ideology that the world is number. Going back to Galileo, only the measurable is real. And I guess that just speaks to the depth of the revolution that we are seeking here, to expand the realm of the real beyond what our dominant religion, science, has told us for a long time. And I could go on, but I know we're out of time. Thank you.